My name is Aerys Thorne. On the 10th of September 2025, I learned exactly how dangerous it is when a man with inherited power tries to erase your existence in public. He succeeded for a time. Then, I erased him. It began, as most corporate disasters do, with the quiet hum of things working perfectly. I was in server room B, the air chilled to a steady 65 degrees. The scent of ozone and filtered air filled the space. This was my sanctuary. Racks of servers blinked in rhythmic green patterns, a silent choir singing the song of data in motion. This was Helios, my creation. For 12 years, I had built it from a single algorithm on a whiteboard into the nervous system of a national telecommunications network. It was not just code, it was a cathedral of logic, elegant and ruthless in its efficiency. I noticed a latency flicker in Rack 7B, a microscopic deviation of 0.001% in the packet routing. No alarm would ever catch it, but I felt it, like a phantom limb tingling. I keyed in a diagnostic. My fingers moved over the terminal with certainty that left no room for doubt. A minor heat-sink issue, easily corrected. I loved this place. It was the only part of the company that made any sense. My office was a testament to my preferences, stark, clean, and functional. A single, resilient ZZ plant sat in the corner, a survivor, like me. On my desk, next to a monitor displaying the beautiful flowing architecture of Helios, was a vintage Kuffel and Esser slide rule. It was a reminder that before brute force computing, there was elegance. I brewed a cup of Lapsang Souchong tea. The water heated to precisely 190 degrees. The smoky pine wood aroma filled the small space. It was the scent of focus. I wore a Nomos Glasshuda watch, a timepiece of minimalist perfection. Details mattered. Then there was Chad Lancaster. The weekly strategy meeting was his stage. He would stand before a whiteboard, marker in his manicured hand. He drew meaningless Venn diagrams connecting words like synergy, disruption, and paradigm. He was 29 years old. He had the unearned confidence of a man who had never faced a real consequence. His teeth were too white. His hair held in place by a product that probably cost more than my first car. He wore a Tom Ford suit like it was armor. That Tuesday, a gray, drizzling afternoon, was typical. I presented my quarterly report on network load. I recommended a phased infrastructure investment to support the next iteration of Helios. Chad waved a dismissive hand. The massive gold ring from his grandfather caught the dreary fluorescent light. Aerys, we're not in the weeds here. We're talking 30,000-foot view. We need to blue sky the paradigm shift. I waited. The silence was my only weapon in these meetings. He turned to the chief financial officer, a man whose spine had been surgically replaced with a weather vane. The customers don't care about algorithmic minutia. They care about the brand story. He then launched into a pitch for his latest marketing brainwave, an augmented reality game tied to our network. It was derivative, technically unfeasible at the scale he proposed. It would introduce catastrophic security vulnerabilities. I had already detailed these issues in a memo he had clearly never read. He had been chipping away at me for months, small, deliberate slights, scheduling critical reviews when he knew I had a family commitment, referring to me as his top technician in emails to the board. And then came the line he had been saving. "We don't need a PhD to tell us where the signal goes," he said. He smiled at his own wit. "We need an MBA to tell us where the money goes." The room chuckled nervously. I just took a sip of my cooling tea. The slow, accumulating poison was part of the job. I logged the insult away with the others, data points in a growing equation of contempt. I did not know then that the equation was close to being solved. The Global Tech Symposium in Las Vegas was the company's biggest marketing event of the year. The air in the convention center was a thick soup of bad cologne, stale coffee, and desperation. Chad was the keynote speaker. He strode onto the stage, a messiah in bespoke navy blue. He delivered a speech of magnificent emptiness about the Lancaster legacy and the future of connectivity. He used the word synergize 17 times. I counted. Then he did something unexpected. I'd like to invite our principal RF engineering director, Dr. Aerys Thorne, to the stage. A spotlight found me in the front row. Confused, I walked the short distance. The cheap synthetic carpet grabbed at my shoes. The stage lights were hot and blinding. He put his hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, proprietary, a gesture of patronizing finality. I want to thank Dr. Thorne for her years of foundational work, he began. His voice echoed through the cavernous hall. The audience applauded politely. But foundations are for building on, not living in. To truly innovate, we must be agile. We must shed legacy thinking. I knew then. The blood in my veins turned to ice. That's why, as of today, we are sunsetting the old engineering model, he announced. His smile never faltered. Our network modernization requires strategic leadership, not academic signal processing. We wish Aerys the best in her future endeavors. He had fired me. In front of 5,000 of my peers, competitors, and colleagues. The cameras flashed. They captured the single, frozen moment of my professional execution. I did not flinch. I gave a curt, professional nod. I turned my back on him and walked off the stage. During that walk, I focused on the details, the slight stickiness of the floor, the scent of ozone from the stage lights, the feel of the cheap polyester lanyard against my neck. I saw the faces in the front row, shock on some, pity on others. On a few of my rivals, a flicker of opportunistic glee. I cataloged it all. It was more data. I did not stumble. My dignity was the only thing I had left to take with me. The silence from the crowd was a judgment, but not on me. That night, I was not in a Vegas hotel room. I was on the first flight back to my quiet, orderly home. My home office is where I do my real work. It is a space of monastic calm. There were no tears. Rage is a chaotic emotion. It is inefficient. What I felt was something else entirely. Cold, focused, and absolute. I poured myself a glass of Lagavulin 16. The peat and smoke were a comforting fire in my chest. On my main monitor, I pulled up the video of my firing. On the second, I opened a folder I had not touched in 8 years. It was labeled Thorne Signal Solutions, LLC. He had no idea what he was really trying to steal. Years ago, when I first signed my contract, I noticed a loophole. A small, beautiful ambiguity in the intellectual property clause. It regarded work developed off hours using non-company resources. So I had built a lab in my basement. On my own time, with my own equipment, I had forged the heart of Helios. I patented every last critical algorithm under my own shell company. The corporation had a license to use it. A license, not ownership. I scrolled through the patent documents. United States Patent number 973615. System and Method for Dynamic Spectrum Allocation. That was the soul of Helios. It was mine. My name was on the filing. My foresight was the weapon. I looked at the clock on my screen. It was 11:59 p.m. My fingers moved across the keyboard with a surgeon's precision. I composed an email. It was addressed to the company's chief legal officer and the entire board of directors. I copied Chad Lancaster. The subject line was simple: immediate cease and desist, patent infringement. The body of the email was 2 sentences: to whom it may concern. This serves as formal notice that as of 12:01 a.m., September 11th, 2025, your license to utilize the patented technologies under the Helios Protocol is terminated. All use must cease immediately. My finger hovered over the mouse. The clock ticked over to midnight. I clicked send. The confirmation appeared. Message sent. A quiet digital declaration of war. A scalpel slid between the ribs of the company. A profound sense of calm washed over me. The equation was solved. I did not have to be in the Network Operations Center to know what was happening. I had designed it. I could see it all in my mind. Chad's new team, a collection of sycophants and yes-men, would be trying to implement his simplified architecture. At first, there would be minor errors. authentication failures at the kernel level, data packets timing out for no discernible reason. I had built Helios with one hidden feature, an absolute loyalty to its creator. Its core handshake protocols were tied to a cryptographic key only I possessed. Without it, the system would treat any command from the central server as a foreign intrusion, a virus. An engineer would report the problem. It's strange. Helios is rejecting our admin authentications. It's like it doesn't recognize us. Chad, in his infinite wisdom, would tell them to re-synergize the mainframe. By morning, the rejections would cascade. The system would not just be failing to obey, it would be actively defending itself. Traffic routing would become erratic. The dynamic load balancing would shut down. Regional servers would overload and crash. Helios was not just a passive program, it was a complex, self-regulating ecosystem, and they were the invasive species. The system was rejecting the usurper. The real collapse began around 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time the next day. I watched it unfold from the comfort of my home office, a fresh cup of lapsang souchong in my hand. I watched his world collapse in real time. News alerts began to pop up on my screen. Nationwide 5G blackout. The network grid on the news channels, usually a vibrant map of green, was turning red. State by state. The company's stock ticker became a plunging red waterfall. I took a slow, satisfying sip of my tea. Chad held a press conference. He looked terrible. His tie was crooked. A sheen of sweat covered his brow. He blamed the outage on a highly sophisticated state-sponsored cyber attack. I almost laughed. What he did not understand was that the attack was not coming from a foreign power. It was coming from a single, perfectly legal email. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Chad. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. And again. Finally, a text message appeared. "Where are you? We need to talk." I texted back an address. It was for a small, empty office space I had leased that morning. The temporary sign on the glass door read, "Thorne Signal Solutions." He burst in an hour later. His Tom Ford suit was rumpled. His perfect hair was a mess. His face was a mask of panic and fury. "What did you do?" he yelled. His voice cracked. "This is sabotage. I'll have you arrested. We'll sue you into the ground." I did not look up from my laptop. I was modeling the financial impact of the outage based on real-time market data. "You can't sue me for asking you to stop using my property, Chad." I finally met his gaze. My own was as cold and calm as the chilled air in my server room. "You publicly terminated my employment. Therefore, you terminated the associated licensing agreements for my intellectual property." "Your intellectual property?" "The company owns Helios." This was the moment. I turned my laptop screen towards him, but it was just a prelude. I pressed a button. My projector hummed to life. It displayed the cover page of U.S. patent number 973615 on the bare white wall. My name was clearly visible under inventor. The look on his face when he realized. It was a beautiful thing, a mixture of confusion, dawning horror, and utter disbelief. It was the face of a man who had lived his entire life on the top floor of a skyscraper, only to be told he did not own the foundation. "You called my work academic signal processing," I said. My voice was even and quiet. I stood and walked to the wall, using a laser pointer. "Let me be academic. This equation here is a modified Fourier transform that governs spectral efficiency. Without it, your network can't distinguish a user's signal from atmospheric noise. That's why 15 million phones currently think they're in a dead zone." I clicked to the next page. "And this block of code? It's the Interference Mitigation Protocol. Without it, every cell tower is screaming over every other one. It's the technological equivalent of the chaos in your NOC right now." I continued. "I also imagine your network clock is drifting. My proprietary synchronization protocol, patent pending, is what kept every node in perfect time. Without it, your data packets arrive out of order, creating digital gibberish." I turned back to him. "Every piece you dismissed, every detail you ignored, I own it, and when you fired me, you turned it all off." He was speechless. He finally understood. He had not been running a company. He had been a guest in a house that I built, and I had just changed all the locks. The board meeting was held 3 days later. I was summoned, not as a former employee, but as a hostile power. I brought my lawyer. They sat on one side of a ridiculously long mahogany table, a row of gray-faced, terrified men. Chad's grandfather was there. Chad was not. Their lawyer started to talk about an amicable solution. I held up a hand. "There will be no negotiation," I said. "I am here to inform you of my terms." My lawyer slid a single sheet of paper across the table. One of the older board members, a man named Sterling, scoffed. "Now listen here, young lady." My lawyer simply pointed a finger at the stock ticker on the conference room's television screen. It was still a river of red. Sterling fell silent. "First," I said, "a $100 million fee to reactivate the network. That is non-negotiable. Consider it a reconnection charge." The CFO gasped. "Second, a perpetual 5% royalty on all company revenue derived from data services. My algorithms are the product you sell. I will be compensated accordingly. Third, a public statement, to be read at the next shareholders' meeting, retracting Chad Lancaster's statements and acknowledging Dr. Aerys Thorne as the sole architect of the Helios Protocol, on which the company's survival depends. They had no choice. The FCC was threatening fines that would cripple them. Their customers were fleeing in droves. They were bleeding $100 million a day. They agreed to everything. 1 year later, I am in my corner office on the 40th floor. The view of the city is spectacular. My firm, Thorne Signal Solutions, now occupies 3 floors of this building. We are the industry standard for network optimization. My old company is my biggest client. My team is a hand-picked collection of the brightest minds I could find, people who value elegant solutions over empty buzzwords. We are currently building Helios 2.0, a system that will make the original look like a pocket calculator. The morning brought news that validated every calculated risk I had taken. The Wall Street Journal ran a front-page feature on the telecommunications industry's transformation. My name appeared 17 times. Chad Lancaster's appeared once in a footnote about corporate governance failures. The Federal Communications Commission had awarded Thorne Signal Solutions the contract for the next generation National Emergency Communication System, a $2 billion project spanning 5 years. The same commissioners who had once threatened fines now sought my expertise to rebuild the infrastructure I had originally designed. Industry awards lined my office walls: the IEEE Medal of Honor, the Marconi Prize, the National Technology Medal, each one a vindication of the technical excellence that Chad had dismissed as academic minutiae. 3 major universities had offered me endowed chair positions. MIT wanted to name their new signal processing lab after me. Stanford was building an entire research center around my published papers on dynamic spectrum allocation. These were the same papers Chad had once called irrelevant theory. My former colleagues from the old company now worked for me. They had witnessed the humiliation on that Las Vegas stage. They had seen the systematic erosion of respect. Now they watched as I transformed the industry that had tried to discard me. Their loyalty was no longer professional obligation. It was genuine admiration. The financial triumph was equally satisfying. My 5% royalty from the old company alone generated more revenue each quarter than Chad's annual salary had been. My consulting fees commanded premium rates across 6 continents. The patent portfolio I had quietly assembled was now worth more than the entire company that had fired me. On my desk, the ZZ plant has grown into a small tree. The vintage slide rule sits in its place of honor beside a new edition. A glass case containing the original handwritten algorithm that started Helios, written on a coffee-stained napkin 12 years ago. I am on the cover of Forbes Technology. The headline reads, "The Quiet Architect, How Aerys Thorne Took Back the Network." The article details not just my technical achievements, but the systematic destruction and rebuilding of my professional reputation. It has become required reading in business schools as a case study in strategic patience. This afternoon, I am giving the keynote at the Global Tech Symposium, on the same stage where I was humiliated. The irony is not lost on the audience. 5,000 people who once witnessed my public execution now rise to their feet before I even speak. My presentation is dense, brilliant, and utterly uncompromising. I explain the mathematics of interference patterns, the physics of signal propagation, the elegant complexity that separates true innovation from marketing theater. The same technical depth that Chad had scorned now commands absolute attention. I receive a standing ovation that lasts 4 minutes and 37 seconds. I count. The applause is not polite professional courtesy. It is recognition of intellectual dominance, of a mind that had been underestimated and had responded with devastating precision. The questions from the audience reveal their complete understanding of the shift in power. They do not ask about market trends or synergistic paradigms. They ask about technical specifications, about mathematical proofs, about the science that actually drives their industry forward. Back in my office, I pour myself a cup of Lapsang Souchong tea. The same ritual that once comforted me in a stark corporate cubicle now celebrates total victory. The smoky scent is no longer just focus. It is triumph distilled into sensory experience. On a television screen in the corner of my office, a news ticker runs across the bottom. It reads, "Former telecom executive Chad Lancaster indicted on charges of misleading investors, stock manipulation, securities fraud." The investigation that followed the network collapse had revealed layers of financial deception, inflated projections, hidden losses, phantom contracts with non-existent clients. Chad had not just been technically incompetent, he had been systematically criminal. His grandfather's company, the Lancaster legacy he had claimed to represent, was now in bankruptcy proceedings. The family fortune built over 3 generations had evaporated in 18 months. The golden ring he had worn so proudly was being auctioned to pay legal fees. I allow myself a small, private smile. The victory is not just professional, it is personal. It is precise, and it is absolute. The equation is solved. Every variable accounted for, every outcome calculated, every consequence deserved. In the end, Chad Lancaster had been right about one thing. The future of connectivity did require strategic leadership. It just was not his strategy. And he was never a leader. He was merely an obstacle that I had systematically removed. The market had spoken. The technology had spoken. Justice had spoken, and they all spoke my name.